I'd like to talk about your inner guide. Your inner guide can show up for you in so many different ways. Sometimes your inner guide shows up as a voice in your head. Sometimes the inner guide can show up through omens and oracles. Sometimes your inner guide can show up as a guardian angel. Sometimes you can have a very formal interaction with your inner guide using systems and rituals and things like that. And sometimes it's very informal. Sometimes your inner guide speaks to you in very clear words, and sometimes it's through symbols, and sometimes it's through impulses. It's just important for us to understand that that guidance is there. Let's just really distill it down, because I think it always helps for us to distill things down so that we don't get mired in all kinds of complexities which are not helpful. Let's look at a Christic perspective for a second. You know how the Christians say there's only one begotten Son of God? You can think of that as being true if you consider that you're it, that we're all part of that. And so throughout that oneness, we have our identity. When we start to think of ourselves as being fragments of creation, then we come into an understanding of how we are as individual egos. And individual egos tend to be fearful, and they tend to be combative, and they tend to attack, because an individual ego is not a reflection of the truth. Truth is unity, and separation is illusion, is one way to look at it. And so in terms of the function of your inner guide's function is ultimately to guide you back into who you are in the unity of creation, rather than reinforcing your illusions that you're separate and alone. So however your guide can do this, it will. whatever means are available to it, it will utilize. So for some people on their individual paths, this comes in a form perhaps of a guardian angel or an animal spirit or something like that. And for others, it's simply a feeling of knowing and a feeling of peace. But it's important to understand that the ego mind is also capable of giving its own sort of guidance. And so a lot of times people will ask, how do I know if I'm listening to my guide or if I'm just listening to part of my own ego? How do I know if it's just not me playing games with myself or if it's my guide? And that's a really good question, and I think it's an important one. Here's a thought. Infinite intelligence is synonymous with infinite peace. There is only peace. Peace is the constant. Peace is the reality. And anything that disrupts that peace is part of an illusion or part of a dream of separation. And so any time that you get guidance that's bringing you back to peace, that's bringing you back to unity, then you know that you're listening to a voice that is for that unity. Whereas if you're listening to a voice that is reinforcing disruption, reinforcing grievance, reinforcing conflict, then you know that you're probably listening to something you're making up. It's important to understand that as an individual little ego that is not recognizing who you are as a soul, that you don't know your own best interests by definition. You just don't. You're not connected to the soul, so you're not connected to the wisdom of who you are. You are identifying yourself as something that's separate and alone. And if you're identifying as something that's separate and alone, then your best thinking as a separate, alone little ego is not going to get you very far. That's why we need an inner guide. We need that inner guide to guide us back to the truth, to guide us back out of these illusions, to guide us back out of these dreams, so that we can find that unity that's already existing. Now, I love using that image of the Kabbalah, that tree of life, to demonstrate this, because, there's that little sphere, they call it a theoretical sphere in the middle, that dot sphere. And that is the sphere of gnosis. And what we would say is that's where you actually are existing. You are existing right now like you're asleep, in your bed in that sphere, and dreaming dreams that you're alone and that you're separate and that you got to fight for every little thing and that you got to fight other people for your place. And this whole world is part of that. This whole world is part of that dream, that illusion that we're in some kind of conflict at all times. But all the while, you're sleeping safely at home on that little sphere, on that tree of life where none of this is really happening, where none of this is really occurring. When you're in the midst of those nightmares, there is, like Ariadne in the labyrinth, there is that little cord, that little cord that you can follow back home to where you're asleep, back home to where you're resting. And then eventually you'll wake up. But that cord is that inner guide. And you can find your way out of any problem through that cord or through that inner guide. And the way that you notice who that inner guide is and where they are and what they're teaching you is based on what you're feeling. And the more you listen to that inner guide, the more peace that you experience, the more certainty that you experience, the more that you recognize that all is well. And the more that you listen to the other voices in your head, the more upset you get and the more agitated and the less peace that you experience, the more conflict you experience, the more problems that you have. Now, let's just put a pin in that for a second and look at the magical/metaphysical realities of this world. You are imbued with great power. And that's because of who you are. If you think of yourself as an extension of the divine, then the same creative power your parent has, you have. And that means that anything that you can conceive of, you can achieve. Anything that you can conceive of, you can realize. And the problem with that is that most of the things that we conceive are things we don't want realized in our lives. And that is basically what this world consists of. The conceptions of a fragmented mind, a split mind, a chopped up mind, a mind that thinks it's very separate and very alone and very afraid and must fend for itself. So remember that all things in this world, if you look at it this way, all things in this world are simply projections, magical projections from your mind. So when you look at the world, you could look at the world as being not what you think it is. It's not out there, but it's something that's inside you that you've projected onto the screen of space and now you're interacting with. But we don't want to take responsibility for that amount of pain and that amount of fear. We don't even want to look at that as being something that we had anything to do with. So we create a world where we are victimized by the world. And we all do that. We're in one big giant dream where we're dreaming that we're in this world of conflict. And that's not to say that the world of conflict is such an illusion. And so, what do we care? Because in this illusion, it's very real here. We have a very real experience of these conflicts, of these problems. We're rife with them. But bringing this up is just to recognize where this emanates, where it originates. It originates from us. It originates from our power being misused. And so we're projecting all of these false ideas onto the screen of space and then experiencing them together as one big mass hallucination. So that inner guide then is there specifically to guide us so that we can find the truth in the midst of all of this, finding that thread that we can guide ourselves back out of this illusion and back into the truth. And that is accomplished through the practice of peace. And so if you want to find your true inner guide, then where you go is inside your mind and find peace within your mind. So if you can relax your body first, Remember that your body is a reflection of your mind. You can reverse engineer things. So if you want to find peace of mind, you start out by finding peace in your body. And you find that peace in your body, and then you find a single thought, a single peaceful thought. And you do your best to maintain that peaceful thought over a period of time, even just a moment or a minute to start with. And it's through you focusing and finding that focused intent of peace that aligns you with that inner guidance. So it's not so much always what you experience with that guide in your meditations so much. It's almost like the meditations are there to find the connection. But then it's what you do when you go outside of your meditation, and that you start to interact with this world, with this illusory world. Now, instead of reacting as if you're all by yourself in each encounter, you're bringing that relationship that you've started to establish in your quiet moments into the illusion. And then you ask at every turn, at every encounter, what is this? What does this mean? How do I respond to this? How do I respond to this? What's my highest thought here? And that moment of asking rather than reacting to the world is the highest purpose for you experiencing that relationship with your inner guidance, is in those real world moment to moment encounters with people, with circumstances, with situations. And it's through bringing your relationship to your inner guidance into those real world experiences, it's through that you accomplish great alchemy, that you accomplish great magic, that you accomplish great spiritual returning. It's not so much what you do in a ritual or in a meditation that matters. Those things you use to establish the connection, so that what you bring outside of that meditation or that ritual into your real world experiences, that's where the real magic is. That's where the real magic lies. So it's not so much that you need to connect with your guide so that you can learn some sort of esoteric secrets that you'll write down and put in a book somewhere. It's the esoteric secrets of how to rejoin with your soul within the world, within each encounter of the world. That's what your purpose is, so that it can be very practical, moment to moment to moment to moment. So it's really quite profound what you can accomplish in a single day if you connect first with that inner guidance. So, a lot of people say, well, can I have a name for my guide? Or can they have a figure? Can they have of course, any of those things are appropriate. Whatever works best for you, your guide will show up as. Your guide will show up as whatever works best for you. Now, for a lot of us, we study, like many of us are studying angel magic. So very frequently, the guides will show up in the guise of our teaching angels, because we've established and codified our relationships with them in such a way that makes sense. We have a communicative infrastructure in place so that we can work with our inner guidance in a very specific manner. And that's wonderful. And there's many systems that have that, not just the angel magic course that we work with. There's many different magical systems that have this whole idea of either knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, or finding a spirit guide, or those kinds of things. And that's wonderful, but it isn't your guide. That's just it's just a tool. Like the book itself isn't the knowledge, it's just the vehicle for knowledge. The same with those sorts of systems. The systems aren't the magic, they're the vehicle for the magic. Those systems aren't your guide, they're a vehicle for you to find your guide. Your guide is that peace that you experience within your mind, that peace that you experience within your inner world that calls you back to the truth of who you are as a soul rather than as an ego. And like I said, yes, you can accomplish a lot in those inner moments by yourself, and those are very important. But the real magic starts when you come back out of those meditations, when you come back out of all of that and you start interacting with the world. That's why, a lot of people that spend a lot of time on an ashram, they have all these wonderful heightened experiences, but when they come back to the world, it's almost like they're farther behind because they haven't been able to utilize those experiences in any practical way within the interactions within the illusion that we live in. A lot of times people will think, well, if I can just go off and be a hermit, or if I can have this, solitude for many years, or if I can, just retire onto a mountaintop, then I'll be wise. But that's not the case at all. That's what your inner guide is not going to be able to do anything for you, because it's how you respond to the world in day-to-day activities, in real-world activities. That's where your relationship with your inner guidance is at its highest function, where it functions most highly. See, the thing about spirit is spirit doesn't see things like we do. Spirit doesn't go, okay, that's significant and that's insignificant. That's important and that's not important. That's big and that's little. That's difficult and that's easy. Spirit doesn't see things like that. So when you're thinking, what should I have for dinner? What should I make for dinner? It doesn't see that anxiety of of indecision. It doesn't see that as less important than the anxiety that you're experiencing because you're having a fight with your mate. It really doesn't. It doesn't see one as more or less important. And the reason why that is because once we establish our relationship with that inner guide, we are to use it for everything, not just what we think are important things. Do you see how when you're a little bit upset, that it's just as disturbing to your peace as being a lot upset? You're still not at peace. You're either at peace or you're not. That little bit of tension and upset is just as disturbing as a big tension or upset. And see, that's what it is. When you are functioning as an ego, you have the arrogance of thinking, I know what things mean. I know what things are. I know what this world looks like. I know what it is. I know what I need. Right? I know what's going to make me happy. I know what's going to fix my problems. And when your ego is trying to have a relationship with a so-called inner guide, your ego then says, inner guide, show me what to do so that I can have this. Show me what I can do so that I can have that. And that's not how your inner guide functions. So your ego has when your ego has this inner guide, it's not an inner guide. It's just itself trying to justify its own behavior. Your inner guide is not going to say, oh, I can show you how you can have the things that you think you want, because it doesn't agree with you that the things that you think you want are what you need or what are going to make you happy. So instead, you go to your inner guide at every turn and you say, how do you want me to respond to this? What is my highest response to this? And then you start to recognize that inner guidance is nothing more than your own sanity, your own right mind. It's not external to you. It's not something that's an entity outside of you. In reality, you start to recognize that there is no entity outside of you. There are nothing that is outside of you. Even people don't exist outside of you. People only exist as you perceive them to be. Everything in your world is peopled by situations and personalities that you have established in your mind and projected onto the screen of space. So it's your reaction to those things that are causing your experience here. And your inner guide is there to rethink things, show you how to rethink things, how to perceive things in a new way, in a way that is going to align you with your soul's perception rather than this false perception that your ego mind has hypnotized you with for so long. for many, many lifetimes for many of us. The establishment of that relationship with your inner guidance is essential to waking up to truth. And it's not a difficult thing to do. All it takes is a daily commitment to close your eyes, relax your mind and body, and sit with a peaceful thought for a little while. And that peaceful thought that you're sitting for a little while, for 1 to 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes if you're a little bit more practiced at it. All that does, that's not the important part of your day, really. It's just priming you for the rest of your day so that you're under the guidance of this inner teacher, And again, you're not subjecting your will to some external being because you're so stupid and they're so smart. In reality, what you're doing is you are making a very definite choice to move from an ego-oriented point of view to a spirit-oriented or a soul-oriented point of view. And it's just a decision that you're making once or twice a day. Just 5 minutes a day of being in a meditation where you are holding on to a peaceful thought to the best of your ability in a relaxed state of being puts you under the direction of higher wisdom so that you can access it in every encounter all throughout the day. And that's so much more powerful than any other kind of work that you could possibly do. You're starting to say, I want to see things in a new way. I want to see different things. I want things different. I don't want things the same. I want things different. So I don't know what's going to make me happy. As an ego, I don't know what's going to make me happy. I think I do, but I've been wrong so far. So maybe this isn't the way that it should be. Maybe what I'll do instead is sit and listen to wisdom and bring that wisdom into these encounters and then ask, what do I say? What do I do? Sometimes you'll get it as a voice. Sometimes you'll get it as an impulse. Sometimes you'll get the direction as an omen. Sometimes you'll get it as something that somebody just tells you. You'll see a billboard. You'll see a bumper sticker. But you will get an answer. And you will choose the highest possible choice in any encounter because you've asked. You've asked. And the most peaceful, the most high thought doesn't always look like what you think it's going to look like. And that's the beauty of your teacher. It's not always going to be, oh, yes, sure, yes, I love you, bless you. No, sometimes the most peaceful, loving response to a situation is a big old boundary, a big old no way, you can't do that. But you're not doing it to attack them. You're doing it as a response to your encounter with your inner guidance. And your inner guide says, nope, don't do that. Nope, not today. Tell them no. Sometimes your inner guidance will say, don't say anything. And so you'll just keep quiet. Sometimes your inner guidance will give you words of encouragement to give to somebody. Sometimes your inner guidance will say, get away from that person. Sometimes your inner guidance will say, it's time to read this book. Sometimes your inner guidance will say, stop reading that book. But the difference is that you're turning to it first rather than as a last resort. Instead of waiting for everything to fall down around you and then say, oh, maybe I better find some help. You're coming into each encounter with your inner guidance first. You lead with your inner guidance rather than waiting. It's just a different energy that you hold in each moment. It's not that you become, a completely different person or anything necessarily. It's just that you start to experience life in a way that is peaceful and that has wisdom, and that where problems get solved and relationships come back together, or even if they separate in a way that is healthy and good for you, rather than coming up with ideas all on your own, which usually end up in big problems, in big issues, and financial problems and health problems and relationship problems. You start to look back and say, whoa, boy, I really make some weird choices left to my own devices. However, now that I have this relationship with my inner guide, I'm less prone to those. And I'm noticing now, and you get a track record, and you can say, I'm noticing now that I'm making better choices, more informed decisions, and I'm having a more peaceful life. And I'm starting to get glimpses of what the truth of who I am is as a soul rather than who I am as an ego. So I invite you to take a little time every day to establish a peaceful experience in your body, and then holding a peaceful thought for 1 to 5 minutes, and maybe even up to 20 minutes if you can work up to that. And then utilizing that relationship that you've established for that day into your moment-to-moment encounters that day, and that you bring each encounter, especially encounters where you're prone to react to things, to bring those encounters first to your inner guidance that you've established, and notice how things change. And sometimes they can change so rapidly that you don't even recognize your life anymore. Give it a try for about a week and see if you don't see a difference. And then you'll probably want to reestablish that every day for the rest of your life. Thank you so much for spending a little time with me today. Blessed be.